Welcome back to the shop. This is part 2 of the KTM 150SX 2019 full motor rebuild. In this video we'll be installing the new crankshaft into the motor, putting the motor back together, putting it back on the bike, and starting her up for the first time, running her through some heat cycles. Now if you missed part 1, down in the description will be a link to part 1 where we got into this far of the build. But well, I guess the next thing I need to do is get this little bearing right here. You see that? When you buy the new crank, it does not come with that on there. Here's a new one that came with a new bearing. I have the bearing part of it in the freezer right now, but we're gonna have to get this on the new crank. I have the new crank in the freezer frozen. What I'm gonna do is heat this up with a torch and get it pretty hot, and it'll expand, and that should allow it to slide right over the crank, so we don't have to use a press to press it on. I don't want to use a press to press that on, because obviously we'd have to, unless you have some type of insert to fit in here or whatever, we'd have to, you know, use this side of the crank, and I just don't want to risk knocking the crank off true. So I'm thinking heating is going to be the safer route here. Let me go get that out of the freezer and we'll get started. Woo, look how frozen that crank is, but that's good. It's nice and frozen, so that bearing race is just going to slide right on there with a little bit of heat. Of course, make sure you put it on the correct side. It's going to be the side that the flywheel goes on, the stator flywheel. And I found the socket that luckily enough slides right over the crank, at least far enough right there that's going to allow me to knock that bearing on, even though it should slide on, but in case there's any friction, I'll be able to tap it on in the rest of the way. Alright, here we go. I'm just holding with some vice grips here, using some MAP gas. You can use propane, MAP gas, as long as it's hot. You don't want to get one spot of this bearing too hot and make a blue spot. You kind of want to just distribute the heat and let the heat get around it pretty good. The beauty of having the crank frozen is you won't have to get this quite as hot to be able to slip it right on over. But yeah, I'm just going to sit here on camera and get it hot. It kind of give you an idea of how much time spent on it. Now keep in mind, this is MAP gas. MAP gas is a little bit hotter than propane, so if you're using propane, you might have to leave it on there just a little bit longer. Well, let's see. I want to get enough heat because I don't want to have to do this twice. You know, I want it to slide on completely the first time. I bet she's pretty warm now. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Here we go. Come on now. There it is. Once they equalize in temp, you're not going to be able to slide that bearing off of there. This crank's cold. Look how quickly it melted the ice right here on the side of the crank. That's funny. I might be able to touch this by now. Almost. Yeah, getting there. It's because the crank's frozen, so it's freezing that bearing quickly. But look, I can't. That bearing is locked on there. It is not moving. So I'm going to take this crank for now, put it back in the freezer, continue to get it ice cold again. That way when it's time to slide it into the motor, this side will slide easily into the inner race of that crank bearing. So let me go ahead and put this thing back in the freezer and let it get cold while we're working on the rest of the motor. Alright, I guess it's a good time to knock these seals out. So let me get this first seal out right here. There's number one. Now I'm going to leave that one out, the new one. I'm going to leave that out until we get the motor together, and I'll show you why in a minute. I'm going to knock the other one out over here. Now this one you have to put in, because there's no way to put this one in once you have the cases put together. So this one I have to put in now, but the other one I'm going to leave it out. It's going to help us slide them cases to get a little bit easier, but I'll show you that when we get there. Just going to clean up down here underneath the seal a little bit. Alright, okay, gonna put the new seal in here. There's so many different ways you can put this in. I actually do have one of these seal and bearing tools from Tusk, but you don't need that. You can actually just set it in its groove and tap it in gently with a hammer. There's so many different ways. If you've never done this before and it's your first time, maybe grab two just to be safe, in case you damage the first one trying to do it. But they're really easy. Let me give another hit for good measure. There we go. That looks good. Alright, to ease installation of the crank bearing, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven at about 170 degrees just for a couple minutes, get some heat in it. I do have the bearing in the freezer. That's going to allow us to just tap it in really gently with the hammer. That way I don't have to use the press, and they go in really easy this way. Alright, let's do this. I got it nice and toasty. Let's see how hot it is. About 150 degrees or so, as you can see. Yeah, about 156 is what we got. So all you gotta do is just get a little bit of heat in them, and they're good. And then freeze the bearing. So we got the bearing frozen. We got some heat in that. We should just be able. That's it, guys. It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to hit it hard. Make sure you have a little bit of hand-eye coordination with a hammer. There's going to be people who say, you never use a hammer on a... I hear it all the time, but, you know, been doing this for years. So, there it is. It's in there good, safely. You can do it with a press, too. But if you just heat up the case to about 170, I mean, I only had 150, but close enough, and freeze the bearing, you can just tap them in with a hammer pretty easily. So let's go ahead and get the other side in real quick. Let me go ahead and get that side of the case in the oven for a little bit. Okay, nice and toasty. And the bearing is nice and frozen. Let's work quick here before we lose that temperature. Same thing, use a hammer. Remember, once this cold bearing touches that case, they start equalizing temperature, so you gotta work fast. There it is. Check that out. Now, if you do it this way, using the hammer, try to use one with a smooth face like that. And try to avoid hitting the cases. You don't want to hit the cases, and try to avoid hitting the inner race. You only want to hit this outer ring right here. Again, make sure you got good hand-eye coordination. If you don't, then you might want to use a press, or you can buy these again, the bearing and race install kit. This little thing right here from Tusk Rocky Mountain. Although I find that absorbs a lot of the hit, a lot of the punch of the hammer, and you got to hit harder. And I don't know, if you got good hand-eye coordination, this is probably the easiest way to do it, honestly. Okay, let's keep moving forward. Case is still a little toasty, a little bit, can't touch it very long. This one's finally cooled down where I can touch it to some degree, but I can continue working on it. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is, I need all these parts to stay on as I'm putting this motor together. I don't need stuff falling out, so let me make sure the shift forks, the pins are all the way in. Yes, they are. What I'm going to do is take some grease, some thick grease, and this is just going to hold stuff in for me so it doesn't fall out as I'm sliding these cases together. Stuff like that little washer right here, I'll just load that up with a nice little bit of grease. Of course, it will contaminate the gearbox oil just a little bit, so you will want to change your oil after break-in, but you know, it is what it is. Put a little more on this side. Alright, I think that's good for there. Now I would like to take this pin out right here and put it on the other case. That way I can have the gasket, the crank, and everything all on one side, and just slide this on like a lid. But this thing's stuck in here and I can't get it out, and I'm not going to force it out. If it wants to stay on that side, so be it. So I'll just put this one over here on this side, and seems to be staying on its own, so I won't have to add any grease to that. Okay, so the crank is still in the freezer, get nice and cold. What I'm going to do is heat up this inner race just a little bit, and then I'll rush in the house. And actually, let me go get the crank first, and then we'll heat it up. Once you heat that inner race up just a little bit, and that's why I left the seal out on the other side, because you can get that seal in once we get the crank in. We'll be able to knock that in, but that's why I left that out, so we can put heat on it safely without actually damaging the seal. So let me go get the cold crank, and then I'll come back, heat this up a little bit. We'll just slide it right on in there. There we go. Same thing, you want to distribute the heat. Let me shut off my light so I can see exactly where that flame's going. Just go around it, get it nice and toasty. You don't want to overheat it and darken it or anything. You just want to get a, you know, decent amount of heat on it so that it expands, and then that ice cold crank will slide in. And again, you work fast when it's time to slide them in, because they'll equalize in temperature real quick once they touch each other. So you only got a couple, maybe 10 seconds to work with it once you go for it. And like I said, because I don't have the crank seal in there, I don't have to worry about melting that. That should be good enough. Let's see. Alright, here we go. Make sure you slide the correct side in. Oh, hold on here. Trying to get it on camera. There it is. So you don't have to beat it, hammer it, or anything like that. Just slide it in. Once the crank's cold and bearings warm, they just slide together. Let that, give that a second for the temperature to equalize. Once it equalizes, I should be able to slide it back out. Yeah, see, I can't slide it back out now. It's stuck. Alright. Still got all this stuff over here, but I got to get the crank seal in. So let me get the new seal, and we'll just tap that on in. Because I can't put anything over the center of it, you're gonna have to be careful. Use something flat and just kind of work it in. Hold on here. All right, let's try it again. There you go. I just needed it in a little bit to bite and hold itself in. Just take your time and only hit the high spots until it goes in, because you want to slide it in as evenly as possible. What I'm doing is I'm resting the flat end right on that lip, so it only can hit it in as far as that lip. Trying to make it as even as possible. There we go. That crank seal is in. It is time to slide these cases together. We're about to slide these things together. Brand new gasket. Unfortunately, I got to put it on the other side because I showed you that the dowel pin was stuck on that side. So, and it's not the end of the world. Alright. Make sure we got everything in place. Make sure these are pressed in their slot and their groove perfectly fine. Make sure the transmission's pressed all the way in. Let me try to get this on camera a little better here. There we go. Maybe you can see that a little better. Okay. Of course, the crank is getting wet because condensation, but that's okay. I'm going to spray some WD-40 on it in a second once I get these cases together, and that'll keep it from rusting or anything. I should just be able to slide this on nice and gently. Let me get a rubber mallet real quick. Should have had that on hand. Oh, don't even need it. Now it's just sliding on. I see how you are. Okay. Make sure the crank spins freely, transmission spins freely. Yes, it does. Okay, now I need to get some of the mounting the case hardware and start putting that in its place. I'm going to set each one in there first by hand, figure out what hole each one goes into. They should all stick out equally when they're in the correct hole, even though some are longer and some are shorter. This is a little longer one right here. I believe this one goes. Yes, it does. Alright, let me check the gasket, make sure. Oh, we're missing one right there. Okay, I'm going to tighten them by hand next, but let me still check, make sure everything's spinning nice and freely. Yes, the crank is, and so is the transmission. I just want to make sure nothing's binding up. Because that the cordless that I just used doesn't get it real tight. It just bottoms things down for me. But now we're going to go ahead and crank her down. There are torque specs for these. If you don't know how tight to put them, it might be good to follow the torque specs. I've been doing this for a long time, so my hands are pretty calibrated. I know how tight to put them. But you just kind of bottom them out and snug them up pretty good. You don't want to strip them out. They strip out pretty easily. You'll notice that or maybe you can see I'm choking up on the ratchet right here when I go to tighten it. That also limits how much torque I can put on them, so I don't strip them out. And make the second pass. Almost there. And once again, I'm going to make sure the transmission spins, make sure the crank spins. Yes, it does. Okay. The cases are officially put together. I guess I can go ahead and trim away this gasket material now. Just take a box cutter blade, cut it flush. There we go, and do it up here too. Alright, and like I said, I'm going to spray some WD-40 down up in here on the crank just so it doesn't start rusting up. That'll burn out as soon as I fire up the bike. I'm going to spray it quite a bit in here. I want to get it on the bearings and stuff too. And then I'll dump it upside down and get it all out of here. I'll get some up in here. The whole idea is I just don't want this rusting because I'm not going to have this running today. I'm going to have it running tomorrow. I mean, it'll all be in this video, but... Alright, now what I'm going to do is the WD-40 I put in there, I'm just going to hold this upside down for a little bit over an oil pan, and that'll drip right out into the oil pan. Okay, I'm going to have to knock these out. I'm going to need these for the new crank. Let me see... see what I can get knocked it out with. Here we go. Well, that sucker's hanging on there, ain't it? Get on out of there. Got it. Alright, let me get the other side out. We got the one that goes on this side too. Got it. Got an O-ring that first goes around here. And this piece slides on with this piece face outward, and this inward, that's where the O-ring will slide into. Alright. Before I go any further, let me make sure all the transmission gears work and are working well. So I'm going to first pop her into neutral. I'm going to grab the counter shaft where the front sprocket goes on and spin the main shaft. It's definitely a neutral. Okay, I think that's first gear. Let's see. No, that was second gear. Let's go back to first gear. Okay, that's first gear. So as I spin this, I can feel on the other side here, this shaft right here is spinning. Then we'll go to neutral again. That's definitely neutral. It's not spinning. The other shaft. Okay, there's second gear. You want to do a couple rotations with your hands. Make sure there's no binding or anything. It feels nice and smooth. You don't hear any click, 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 clicks or anything. That's just to make sure when you put it on the bike it's going to be okay. It would suck to do all this work and then find out that you got a transmission issue and you got to pull it back out. So that's all the gears. Oh. Trying to get back neutral here. There we go. There's neutral. Take the shift shaft. Remember, it has a washer to it. Don't forget the washer. Slide it on in there. Then you have to take this part right here and slide it up. Alright, got that in place, and the little latching spring up here is in the groove on the case. Make sure you check that, make sure that's lined up good. It should automatically, when you pull it down like that, come up, or when you pull it up, it should come down on its own because of the spring latched onto the case right there. That is good. Okay, what's next? I guess I'll go ahead and get the Kickstarter mechanism out of the way. While you had this out, if this came off, there's a dot right there, and on one of these splines there's a line on it. You can see the line right here in the middle. I don't know if you can see it or not yet. There's a line right there, and that line lines up with that dot, and that's how you know you have this clocked correctly. Alright, I'm going to take this gear right here. You'll notice it has one side that's a little higher than the other. Make sure the higher ends face outward. Slide that on there. And then we have the Kickstarter mechanism. Make sure that spring's pressed on, put on there. Oh, and by the way, there's a little tab right here. We're going to be spinning it to hook that underneath this metal tab right there. There we go. Hook the spring up right here in the shaft, and then hook it up on the case. Alright, now let me test it with the Kickstarter real quick. Feels good to me. Alright, go ahead and put the main crank gear on. I'm going to slide this keyway up in there. We're going to probably have to tap it in with a hammer, but let me get it lined up first. Get a hammer here. Here we go. These can be a tight fit. There we go. Just kind of tap it on with a hammer here. There we go. Okay, I like to use Loctite on everything, even though it has a locking washer on it. It's just good practice. So I'll put a dab of Loctite on it. Like I said, even though it's got a locking washer, it's just good practice. Now remember, this is reverse thread. So weird trying to put stuff on reverse thread. I will be using an end pack to put this on. If you're going to use an end pack to put this on, be real familiar with your end pack. You don't want to overdo it and strip it out. These are easy to strip out. Like I said, if you're going to use an end pack, make sure you know your end pack. Make sure you know how strong it is. Be familiar with it. I am familiar with this one. I'm using it on setting number 1 to start with. Remember, this is reverse thread, so I'm going to hold the rod up here so it doesn't fling around. Setting number 1 on this is real light. Now I'm just going to wrap it a couple of times in setting number 2 to kind of seat it down, and that'll be it. There she is. Now, if you don't have an end pack and you have to do it by hand, you can put the clutch basket in, take a piece of aluminum, wedge it in between the gears so it doesn't turn, and then you can use a wrench, ratchet, or a torque wrench and follow the torque specs. Motion Pro does sell like a little aluminum gear that you can sit in here, but honestly you can take any piece of scrap aluminum. It's really soft. It's not going to damage the gears. All you're doing is just torquing. Guess it's time to get that clutch in there. This thing has a bearing. The clutch basket has a bearing. I'll slide the bearing on first. Slide the clutch basket on. There it is. There's a washer. It goes right here. Let me wipe that thing up. That thing's filthy. Got oil goo on it. Wipe this up too. All right. Maybe I should have left it in gear. There it is. Alright. Okay. Pop that right in there. That's going to allow us to lock the nut down. But I will still be using Loctite, even though it does have a locking tab. Just because I don't like anything to come loose mid-moto. It's just good practice. Alright, let me find the right size socket for this. Got it for 27. Start on setting number 1, real nice gentle setting. Then I'll wrap it on number 2 a couple times just to seat it in. There we go. Let me get a set of channel locks and I will lock it down. Might as well do that one too, since it looks like it's already been done before. There we go. Alright, she's locked into place. These things can be a little tricky. They got these things that kind of go right into here like that. If this is your first time doing one of these, and you've done the Japanese bikes before, this one will throw you a little bit of a curveball. You start with a steel plate. This is what makes it hard, these little tubes. Okay, just get it over that one. There we go. There's number 1. Holy cow. And then we'll do a fiber. Then a steel. And you just alternate them, fiber, steel, fiber, steel. And continue on. Like I said, just one steel, one fiber, one steel, one fiber. These KTMs are a little bit different, the way they do the clutches. There we go. We'll have one more steel plate here. Alright. And then this, don't forget that piece right here. It goes in there. This will pop right over them little steel tubes, you see? Looking good. Has this metal ring that kind of goes right in that groove right there. And then the metal plate will go right here, but we have this. Remember I mentioned this earlier in the video? The manual will have instructions to how to find your correct location. There's steps to it. If you look on this side, there's different steps, and whichever set of holes you use to put this clutch down is going to increase or decrease the spring pressure. So you can set it up where it has more spring pressure, pushing the clutch in tighter, harder, although you'll feel that at the lever, or less pressure, making it not, the clutch is not have as much torque capability, but it'll feel lighter at the lever. So the choice is yours. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm just going to follow where it's been at all along from the factory. I'm not going to change anything. And how I can find that out is all I got to do is look to see. I can see the bolt's been bolted down there, but not here or here, and then here. So all I got to do is make sure I put bolts in the same holes that it looks like bolts have already been put into before. Simple as that. Like I said, in the manual, they'll tell you how, if you don't know what holes they go into, the manual explains how to do it. KTM has their own little way of doing it, like looking to see if the diaphragm's flat or whatever. Or you can just go by feel, you know. If you want a little looser, set it up on the looser level. If you want a little tighter, set it up on the tighter level. But again, I'm just putting this one right back to where it was. And, well, for you guys that are curious, let's see, where was it actually? Let me pull it back off. Let's see, where was this? This was on the medium level. So it wasn't on the easier clutch pull level. It wasn't on the stiffer clutch pull level. It was on the medium. And that's where we're putting it back to. Okay, now I'll tighten them by hand. To tighten these, you don't have to use Loctite on these. The spring pressure kind of holds them in place. But to tighten them up, I just hold the clutch by hand and just tighten. You don't want to put them too tight. These are really easy to strip out. Just snug them down pretty good. There we go. Now the clutch is in place. About to button this up. Let me put these back in their grooves. There we go, there's 3 of them. Where's the third one? There it is. Brand new gasket. Looking good. Now I should just be able to pop this bad boy in place. There you go. Sometimes you got to spin the crank a little bit, like I just did there, to get the gears to line up for the water pump for the clutch cover to fall into place. And this is the same thing as earlier. You just put the bolts in the holes, all the bolts in the holes ahead of time until they're all sticking out equally about that far. And you know you got them in the right holes, then you tighten them up. Alright, got them all in their proper place. Now I'll tighten them all down by hand. Same way. Again, easy does it. You don't want to strip them out. Just snug them down, bottom them down pretty good. Snug them up, that's all it takes. This one right here I'll have to hit with a wrench because it still has that tab blocking it. I'll come back to that one. Alright. And double check everything one more time. Make sure the crank spins freely, nothing's binded. I'm going to go ahead and put the Kickstarter on now and double check that. Grab the rod here. Feels good to me. Guess we can go ahead and get the reeds back in now. Pop in these V4s, 4 reeds. Okay, I think the next question is going to be, how am I going to do this? Am I going to put the bottom end in the motor, and then put the top end on, or am I going to put the top end on while it's on the bench and then just put the whole motor in the bike? Oh, I'm trying to center this out a little bit, blueprinting a little bit, make sure there's no edges. Okay, there we go. I think I'm going to put the top end together while it's on the bench for this one, and then I'll just drop the whole motor in the bike. It's a 125, so they're smaller motors, or I'm sorry, it's a 150. Same thing though. So it'll fall in really easily. I don't have to worry about like the frame getting in the way if I have the whole motor complete or anything. So I think I'm going to do the top end right here on the bench. Let me pop this in too before I forget. The flywheel here. There we go. Good morning. Breakfast of champions. Time to get back on this. We're going to put the top end on her now and then put the motor in the bike. Alright, I'm just going to take a little bit of pre-mix. Put it on the rod bearing here and the around the crank and stuff. Just get some lubrication on it for the first start up so it's not dry. Just going to pour it in there, swish it around a little. I'm going to try to hit these little holes right here, and that sends it right down to the crank bearings. And swish it around a little bit more. There we go. Now we got some oil in there for the initial startup. The cylinder base gasket. KTM sells about 5 to 7 different base gaskets for per two-stroke that they make. You can see the thickness they put down here, and that represents the 40.40 millimeters. That represents the 40 right there at the end of the part number. I'll explain to you after we put it together how to tell if you have the proper gasket thickness or not. But let's go ahead and continue. I know that this is proper for this motor because I put this motor together last time. So I just ordered the same base gasket. And if you need more instructions than what I provide in this video on how to figure out exactly what size base gasket you need, if you go to part 1 of this video, down in the description will be a link to where I did a top end on this bike, and in that video I discuss a little bit deeper, but there should be enough information on this one for you. I'll get to that once I get the cylinder on. I'll show you that we're checking how high the piston goes up in the cylinder, and that's how we know if we have the proper cylinder base gasket or not. Again, KTM in their OEM parts section, I have a video on how to order your OEM parts too. You can search for that in my videos, but they have about 7 different thicknesses for this bike. So it's important to make sure you get the right one. Brand new Racer Elite Wise Cove piston. Have I not pulled this out of the box? Let me cut it open. Alright, got it open now. Have the piston ring there. Piston's going to be in this bag. Piston pin. And they always hide the circlip. The circlip's up in the piston. There they are right there. These are beautiful pistons. These Racer Elite pistons. They come with 1 ring. Unlike the stock bike that has 2 rings, they're lightweight, they're strong. Before I put it in, let me at least just check the fit. Now I'm going to put it in the cylinder upside down here, make sure we got, there it is, nice snug fit. Alright. When putting the piston ring on the bike, there is a up and a down side this piston ring. See the end right there? That is going to be your upside. When you put the ring on the piston, there's a pin. Oh, sorry. There's a pin right there. So you want to put the, it's only on one side of the piston. You got a pin in there in the ring groove. Make sure the end is faced up. We can see it's faced up here. Got that. Alright. Cut out the wrist pin here. I'm going to put one circlip on it before I put the piston on the motor. Alright. Get in there. There we go. Alright, I'm going to put the wrist pin in there. That's going to help me when I go to put the circlip in so it doesn't get pushed all the way through. You see the open end of the circlip right there? And you see that groove, that cutout they put right there? I'm going to slide the open end up into there. Hold this side of the wrist pin in by hand, the circlip in by hand, and just use this flathead and walk it in. Watch how I do this. But you got to hold the wrist pin on the other side with your finger on the back side of the piston so that doesn't slide so the out the other side. There it is. And then I like to have that open end of the circlip right in the middle of this groove, so I'm going to slide it over a little. There we go. Looking good. Now we can go ahead and put the piston on the bike. I'm sorry, on the motor. Brand new wrist pin bearing, Wiseco. And I'll drop a little bit of 2-cycle oil on this bearing as well before I slide it in. Alright, slide it right up in here. Alright, slide the wrist pin back out of there. The arrow faces towards the exhaust side on these pistons, and you can always tell if you got it right too, because remember that pin I told you for the ring, the ring end gap, the little locating pin they have in there, that's always going to be on your intake side of the motor. So I like to check both the arrow and look for that little pin to make sure I have it right, just in case. You never know, they might accidentally put the arrow on the wrong side of the piston or something. You never know. I'm gonna put this circlip. Yeah, I'm gonna put the circlip in the same way I did the other one. There it is. Slide it over to the middle. Okay, now I'm gonna make a visual all the way around. Make sure it's all the way in its groove and on the other side. It's looking good. Feels good. Alright. Now it's time to slide the cylinder on. Again, make sure the ring end gap is still in the same area as that ring pin. I gotta admit, it's much easier to do this when it's on the bike for me. I'm not used to doing this on the bench so much, but we'll get it done. There we go. Alright. I'm going to replace the 4 12mm nuts that hold the cylinder down and then tighten them up. You want to put these pretty tight. You don't want to strip them, but put them pretty tight. I've seen them come loose before because people didn't have them on tight enough. If you're using a standard, just regular wrench on it, that'll be fine. It'll kind of help promote you not to over tighten it. Strip it out. Or crack a cylinder, even. Alright, I think I have that. Okay, here's how you tell if you have the right cylinder base gasket. You put the piston at top dead center. Find the highest spot that you can find the piston, or that you can set the piston, and it should be even with the mating surface of where the cylinder head goes on here. It should be dead even, like that. Now, KTM does say if one of their gaskets, let's say you have two gaskets one size apart from each other, if one has a piston coming above the surface just a little bit, and the other gasket has it going below the surface a little bit, to favor the one, to pick the one that has a piston coming slightly above this mating surface a little bit. If you have to split hairs, choose the one that sets the piston slightly above. This one is it's either equal or maybe the piston's ever so slight above, but this is the correct one for the bike. If it's the first time doing it, it doesn't hurt to buy a few different sizes if you don't know. You can check your top end before you take it apart and pull the cylinder head off and see where it's at. And if it looks good, then when you pull it apart, you can measure with a set of mics. You can mic the gasket to kind of get an idea what size you might need. And but even then, it doesn't hurt to order a couple the first time of different sizes, so you can make sure you get it dead on perfect. And then note that, write that down, whatever size it was. The next time you have to do top end, you know what gasket to order. Before I can reconnect the power valve here, I do have to set the gasket behind it, because once I connect that up, I'm not going to be able to get that gasket in there. Alright, now I can plug this in. Pops on like that. Then we have that little clip that we have to put back in. You want to be real careful not to drop that clip in there, because then you'll have to pull the whole clutch cover off to get it out. So what I'm going to do is grab with a set of very small narrow needle nose and try to slide it in that way. You really can't see where the hole's at. You got to kind of poke around till you grab it. There it is. And now I'll just put the cover back on. Now turn the motor around, put the cover on the other side. Now tighten these down and put the cylinder head on, and then we can put the motor back on the bike. Brand new cylinder O-ring gaskets. See how this fits. Fits good. Sometimes they're a little bit too small, and you got to stretch them to get them to fit perfectly well. But these look like they're fitting well right out the bag, so we are good there. Take the cylinder head, put it on. There we go. Replace all the bolts. Make sure you don't forget the little copper washers that go underneath it, or it will not seal if you don't have them on there. And now I'll just tighten these down by hand. You don't have to put these real tight. They have rubber that seals. It's not like a steel shim head gasket. I'm just going to use a small ratchet here. But you can strip these out really easily, and then this cylinder is pretty much trash. So don't do that. You can see how I'm choking up like this. So I don't put it down on there too tightly. Go back around one more time. Just don't put it too tight. Like I said, you don't want to strip them out. You can always tighten it up a little bit more if you end up with one leaking. Usually if they're going to leak, it's going to be around one of them copper washers. If it does, you can tighten it down a little bit tighter and see if that stops it. If that doesn't stop it, don't continue to keep tightening it down. Try a new washer, because that just kind of indicates probably that your washer is already flattened out and done. Alrighty, I think that's it. I I think we can go ahead and put her in the bike now, so let's do that. Alright, let's put the new motor in. Okay, the motor is in place. I think the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get the carburetor and the spark plug in there. That way I can get all the holes covered up so I don't have to worry about anything going into the motor. Alrighty. Before I put the carburetor on, let me lift the subframe up a little bit and clean around this lip right here, because any dirt that's on that lip will find its way inside. So you want to get that cleaned up. I know the reed boot lip is clean because I had that on the motor when I was rebuilding it. Alright, let's slide this up in here. Let's see, I think this hose went on this side. There we go. There it is. It was being stubborn. Let me center it out. There's a little tab on the top of the carburetor here. If you look at the rubber boot, there's a slot that lines up with, and that's how you know you have the carburetor clocked correctly. Go ahead and tighten up this clamp now so it doesn't move. And then I'll tighten up the back clamp right here too. Alright, went ahead and replaced the spark plug, put this radiator hose on, put that hose on over there on this side of the motor. Same thing, that hose right here, connected this vent right here. So I think I'll go ahead and knock out these motor mounts right here real quick. Alright, got them two motor mounts on here. I also replaced the subframe bolts, the bottom one's down there. So I think next I'm going to go ahead and work on getting the stator on, stator flywheel, the hydraulic slave clutch slave, hydraulic, whatever, front sprocket, chain, all that kind of junk. Okay, for the clutch here, remember this rod that goes in the middle? I'm going to go ahead and put that in place now. And I'll just lightly set this here, if it'll stay. There we go. I'll bolt that out down in a minute. I just wanted to get that out of my way, and held out of my way. So we're going to go ahead and get the flywheel on now. Actually, I meant the stator. Gonna get the stator on. So this goes underneath. We'll start with that first. As with everything, Loctite, just a dab will do. I prefer the red stuff myself. You can use blue if you like, but if you use the red, just a dab will do. That's all you have to do, and it will hold it on, and it will not come loose again until you need it to. Because honestly, the last thing you want is this stuff to come loose while you're out riding the bike. It's happened to me before in my younger days. But now I use Loctite and everything. And my bikes, I don't remember the last time I actually had a failure while I was at the track or out riding. I honestly don't remember, besides flat tires or something. Pretty much every time I go out, my bike's pretty much guaranteed to make it to the day. No issues, no bolts come loose, nothing breaks. I stay up on my maintenance. Okay, so we got that tight. Let me double check, sitting here talking, not paying attention. You don't want to strip them out, just put them pretty dang tight. Alright, put that little rubber piece in the groove. That's, oh, almost forgot this thing. Where does this go? There we go, this goes underneath here. Just like that. That just holds the wires underneath it from rubbing against the pickup. And the same thing, Loctite for these as well. Put a dab on each one. There we go. There we go. Dab a Loctite of them. Hold them on. Alright. Stator flywheel. Let me spin it around this way, get the keyway upward. Okay. There it is. Same thing, Loctite. You definitely don't want this coming loose. I've had it happen. It'll start clanking around, clattering around. And if you keep riding your bike, it'll eventually just shut off. Wash underneath it. Alright, let me get my impact. Same thing, if you're going to use an impact on something like this, be familiar with your impact. You can strip these out. I am familiar with mine. They do sell a tool that you can grab this right here and hold it and tighten it with the a ratchet if you want, or a torque wrench, and follow the torque specs and everything like that. I've been doing this for a lot of years and I am very familiar with my tools, so I'm okay doing it like this. I'm going to start on setting 1 with this impact. It's very light, doesn't do a lot of foot-pounds at setting 1. Oh, wrong way. That'll just bottom it out for me. And then I'll put it on setting number 2. This one has 3 settings, by the way, but I'll put it on setting number 2. Give it a couple quick wraps just to cinch it down pretty good. There she is. On the stator cover, these KTM, they come with a built-in rubber gasket for the stator cover, but they are known, I have found it, that water can still get underneath these and then it causes ignition issues. So I put a bead of black RTV around it. Every time I pull it off, I'll reseal it back up. That way that doesn't happen. I've had bikes brought to me because they're misfiring and acting like there's a bad plug, and you put a new plug in it and it still does the same thing. And I've chased it down to just water underneath the cover. These, they don't seal very well. But with a little bit of gasket sealer, I prefer black so it kind of hides out. With a little bit of black gasket sealer, then that doesn't happen anymore. You can guarantee if you wash your bike with the water, it's not going to get underneath it. Or if you're in a race and you have to go through water, it's not going to get in there. And if it does get in there and it sits all week long and everything starts rusting, and you don't want none of that. So I just suggest using a little bit of black RTV around it. After I bolt it down, I'll take my finger and I'll slide it across the RTV to, across the edge here and pick all that up, or I'll get a rag and do it. That way it gives a nice clean look. Because I will admit, when I see gasket sealant sticking out of a surface, a gasket surface, it looks pretty crappy to me. So I like to wipe it up so you don't see that. I mean, it has to be done on this bike if you don't want water getting underneath there. I understand if you got a newer bike, you might be like, well, I never get water. Maybe that's the case. It doesn't seem to happen to all of them. But I'll tell you what, if I was riding a KTM, even from brand new, I would do this every time, because I have seen what happens when water gets in there. Sometimes you don't even know it's in there. You wash your bike, sits all week long. It might have dried throughout the week, but it starts, leaving rust and corrosion on your flywheel, and that's not good. Okay, let's go ahead and get that slave cylinder on, bolted down, I should say. I'm going to start with just the 2 bottom ones, because the top one we put on with the chain guard, or the what do you call it, front sprocket guard. So I'm going to push in with my hands. I tighten these down. I still need to get the front sprocket on before I can put that on. This front sprocket is about due. These can be a little tough to get on with the chain on there too, but I was able to do it. Guess what? We're not too far from doing a quick test fire just a little fire before I finish putting all the plastic on, just to make sure everything's good. I like to hear that first fire. It'll give me motivation and energy to knock the rest of this job out quick. There we go. Now I can put the front sprocket guard on. Okay, I'm gonna fill her with motor oil, fill her with coolant, put the pipe on, and we're gonna do a quick test fire. I'll be right back. Okay, got the pipe on. I went ahead and put the gear shifter on just in case. What if the kill switch doesn't work and I can't shut it down, right? Want to be able to put it in gear, hold the back brake in, let the clutch out, and kill it. So I put the gear shifter on, put the kick lever on, got the pipe on, got the gas tank on, got the gas on, got it full of motor oil, got it full of coolant. Let's give it a test fire. First time starting it, it might take a few kicks to get everything primed up and started, but let's see. Turn the choke on. Well, it's running a little weird. Let me look it over and let me open the shop door up and get the smoke out of here. Woo! Okay, I chased that down to a clogged up pilot jet. How that got clogged up, I don't know. I mean, it has a fuel filter on it. I can see it there. I have no clue. I mean, I understand that does happen to 4-strokes when you let them sit around for a while, but two things about this one. It hasn't been sitting around for a while, number one. And number two, that typically doesn't happen to a 2-stroke because the oil that you have mixed in the premix keeps the gas from clogging up the jets when the gas dries up in the carburetor. So why that happened, I do not know. But I'm starting to wonder if that's what caused the crank to go out. With the pilot jet being clogged like that, if the bike was continued to be ridden, it would definitely cause it to run way too lean down low, starve it of fuel and oil. Who knows? But check it out now. Let's start her up again. Runs good now. There you go. I also reset the idle. I like them to idle nice and low. I guess the kid that was practicing on it for Loretta's, they might have cranked the idle up a little bit. That's a preference, but okay. Let me continue to put this plastic on. I got to bolt the tank down, put that number plate on right there, put the seat back on, replace this front sprocket guard. I pulled that off to pull the pilot jet out of the carburetor to clean that up. Let me go ahead and do that. I'll be right back, and we're going to run it through a heat cycle and see how she does. By the way, I mentioned that it does have a fuel filter on it. You're probably looking at yours right now wondering why you don't have one. They have a built-in fuel filter on top of the petcock here in the tank, and that's usually good and usually does the trick, and that's usually all you need. That's all I ever use. Some people do decide to add these end lines in as well, but that's what I was basically pointing at. That I definitely know it's got a fuel filter because I see one in line here. Alright, let me continue putting it together and we'll run it through a heat cycle. Oops! An extra bolt. Where does it go? Forgot one of the case bolts underneath this cover right here. Let me pull this cover off and replace that real quick. That kind of stuff happens when I'm making a video. I'm too busy talking. Let me do that real quick. There we go. Replace that. Real world here, guys. We all make mistakes. But at least I caught it. Okay, she's complete. Everything's back on her. All the bolts are on her. Let's go ahead and run her through a heat cycle. Let's do it. Going to sit here and let her get nice and warm, and then we'll blip the throttle a few times. I'll feel the top of the radiator, just feel how the temperature is doing. Waiting for her to get fully warmed up. Go ahead and check for water leaks, make sure this head's sealed up good, everything's sealed up good. Everything's looking good on this side, all the hoses are doing good. So far, so good. Okay, I'll let her cool down for about 15 minutes and start up, do another heat cycle. What I suggest is 3 heat cycles like this on the stand, where you get it fully warm, where the top of the radiator is pretty hot, and shut it down, let it cool down for about 15 minutes. Do that 3 times, that's what I do at least. When you get to the track on your first ride, make it a shorter ride on the first ride, about 8 to 10 minutes long, and try to avoid sustained full throttle. It's okay to get the full throttle if you have to get over a jump or whatever, short bursts. You just want to avoid them, you know, wide open stretches where you're the whole time. The idea is you want the piston and the cylinder to heat up equally, nice and easy. So to do that, you avoid long sustained full throttle runs. So after the first ride of 8 to 10 minutes, come back in, check your coolant one more time, let it cool off another 15 minutes, and if everything's good, at that point you can consider it broken in and you can give her all the beans. But I'm gonna pause the video for a second, let her cool back down, and we'll run her through one more heat cycle and give her a couple good blips of the throttle to make sure that she revs all the way up and that the power valve's working good and everything like that. So let's let her cool down for a second. I'll be back. Alright, here we go. I guess you can call this heat cycle number 2, I guess. I'm just going to let her sit here and get nice and warm, and then we'll blip the throttle a few times. Alright, let's give her a couple good blips and rev her out and make sure the power valve is allowing her to rev up. She's sounding good to me. No leaks. Oh, that's pretty much it. Look at that. Out with the old and with the new. Well, that's pretty much it for this KTM 150 full motor rebuild. This weekend I'm going to be racing an FTR race in Bartow. I'm going to take the YZ125 out for that one. Got our numbers here. I'll be racing the Senior B because I'm an old man now. The wife will be racing the Woman's B. Got our numbers all situated. Got to put them on the bikes, get that ready for the weekend. But I appreciate all my subscribers. I hope you guys have a great weekend of riding too. If you enjoy this kind of stuff and you like it, just click subscribe. And hope everyone has a great weekend of riding. Catch you guys next time.